Your kid comes home one day and says, "Dad, I found God. I'm going to church now." How disappointing.
Do you want your kids to maintain the same ideology you do about God? What about politics? Well, on average, about only 6 in 10 actually will. Let's take a look at exactly why that is and how you can keep your kids believing what you believe into adulthood. About 60 to 70% of kids will maintain your political views. However, only about 50% will maintain your political party status. And this could be because they believe kind of what makes up a good life, similarly to their parents, but they may want to go independent or at least have that a bit of subversion or a bit of freedom and liberty from what their parents originally taught them. However, that comes across more in party affiliation than it actually does in beliefs about political views individually. Most shockingly, only about 50 to 60% of kids will maintain their parents' religious views. This actually kind of scares me because what's much more important than what I believe about politics is what I believe about God, the Father in heaven. And this is something that we have to make a little concessions. We have to understand our own hypocrisy in order to be able to make them retain our religious views. Let's take a look at how we might be able to do that as parents.
Those individuals. You're actually terrorizing individuals because so many queer folk end up in very self-destructive lives and behaviors, not because pushes them to be in that behavior, because their loved ones and their communities of faith that's supposed to love them and care for them keeps pointing fingers and telling them, well, based on our understanding of these 6 passages in the Bible that we are not properly translating, you are evil.
Certain religions have better retention rates, and they tend to be the ones that are more fundamentalist or a little bit more strict, but most importantly, coming from the households where the parents practice their religion well religiously, meaning they do it weekly. There are practices and disciplines within the home, as well as attending a church consistently that comes about within the family. So if you want to retain your kids in your religious fundamental beliefs, then it is best to be religious about your own practices. Demonstrate it within the home, but there are some pitfalls. Let's take a look at that. More fundamentalist religions like Orthodox Judaism, Mormonism, or others that have a little bit more in-group preference, so they don't go outside of their bubbles as much. They have better retention rates at about 70 to 80%, while Catholics, nominal Catholics, or mainline Protestants have a retention rate of about 40 to 50%. So the more that you have an in-group preference, the more that you maintain that in-group, with your kids' circle of friends, with the influences that are around them, including education, the more likely they are to remain within your religious preference. So why might kids walk away from your religious system? One way that automatically gets to kids is they begin to listen to their peers with more reverence than they do their parents. This is a natural adaptation that's supposed to help the kids push away from the parents and begin to build their own lives, but their friends matter. So if your friends of your children are way out there, if they're doing things that might have to do with substance use or other ways that they might push your children away from you, that's one way that your religious beliefs will begin to waver and they might walk away from the faith that you taught them to begin with. Second reason kids might walk away from your religious views is their higher education. Of course, we know that there's an indoctrination station that's been set up within the higher education system, and this is a long march through the institutions that's been described in how to move from the society we had at the founding of this country to the society that the higher education system wants us to have, which is a strictly secular society. So this religious view, preference for secularism is going to help in the higher education system push our kids away from religiosity. And by the way, all these universities in the first place were founded under the premise of learning more about the world so that they can understand more about God. Even Harvard and all the institutions that we think of as being some of the most left-leaning were all founded under religious primacy. Another huge factor in the way that kids have been indoctrinated one way or the other is social media. Now, this has had an effect on how kids might swing away from their parents' religious views, but it has also had an effect in somewhat moving young men more towards conservatism. Now, 56% of men between ages 18 to 24 report preference for conservatism, while only 22% report a preference for liberalism. And that is largely because of the messages they're getting on social media, not just pro-conservative messaging, but also the messaging from the other side that tells them that they should sit down and shut up and all the stuff we already know. Moving more toward what is within the control of the parents is kids will walk away from our religious preferences and possibly even our political ideologies if they see us acting as hypocrites. So this is something that we can try to help them understand, that everyone makes mistakes. There is such a thing as being a broken person, sent into a created world that was inherently broken after the fall. And so while that is occurring and your parent or your kids get to the age of agency where they begin to recognize that, it is up to us to manage that well and help them understand exactly how it is that they can overcome that through grace and through their own faith, and be able to manage their own brokenness, as well as understand that, yeah, parents are broken. Sometimes we make mistakes, and especially in cases of divorce or other ways that there's an overwhelming hypocrisy, like infidelity, they obviously see that as being problematic to take in your belief system or maintain and retain their own religious upbringing. Another way that the children of parents who have a religion or political ideology might walk away and not be retained to that is through the natural swing of the pendulum. So baby boomers, obviously one of the most left-wing generations that has been, and they raised children, millennials and others, who ended up swinging, a little bit in the other direction. And then millennials raised children who are now swinging, depending on male, female, sex differences, they're swinging drastically in political directions away from what would be typical from their parents. So the pendulum will swing. We have to help manage that. And in an ideal setting, in an ideal system, the pendulum would remain within a limited swing radius, because we don't want extremists on both sides to push, because it will be the extremists, the 1 to 3% who push the pendulum as farther than anyone else. So it's up to us to try not to overreact and to not respond in ways that would actually lead to some of the catastrophic ideologies and social systems of the 20th century. Dear parents, remember that it is normal for kids to break away from you during adolescence and into young adulthood. This is an adaptive response so that they can have families of their own, so that they don't end up being basement dwellers for the rest of their life. So if they're walking slightly away from what it is that you taught them, do not be alarmed. Try to help them manage that in ways that you can be mature and give them good counsel when it comes to how they might want to retain or come back to the faith, or how they may need to manage a complicated world as they begin to understand it in ways that can inculcate or integrate their worldview that they were raised with, whether that's your faith in Christ, your faith in another religious system, or your political ideology. Parents, we are here to help them develop that complex worldview and integrate it into a system that works for themselves and their future families. And don't forget, parents, your money only lasts so long after you're gone. Your name will probably not even be known 2 or 3 generations from now, but what you say to your children will be passed down through every preceding generation. So the words that we say to our kids are much more important than your money and anything else material that you can provide. So be kind, but also be firm, and understand that your words will outlast everything else.